Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. Is Ryzen 7000 going to be very hot? Well, according to some leaks on the internet, it could actually be even hotter than Intel's Raptor Lake. We're going to discuss that in just a moment, and also then get into some very intriguing information that I've personally received for the Ryzen V Cache gaming performance. But, of course, we're going to get right into that after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So I do want to make something very clear, and that is that these are not final production chips with final production BIOS, so essentially this could change over time. But enthusiastic citizen over at Bilibili, I'm going to leave of course a link to their stuff in the video description, has managed to get hold of a 7950X and also the still very impressive 7600X. Now the bottom line here is that the 7950X is basically hitting 95 degrees if running at 230 watts, and the 7600 is running at a super cool, super not toasty at all, 90C, and this is at 120 watts. Now what's quite intriguing is this is not at using some, kind of stock cooler or anything like that. According to their setup, we are actually looking at a 360 AIO, which was being used to cool these chips. Now I will say that it was being conducted in Ada 64. There was no overclock, but even so, Ada 64 is kind of punishing, so I'm sure that an average gaming benchmark is not going to be such a big deal. But anyway, Enthusiastic says the following: this time Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake, the multi-core 7950X will lose to the 13900K with no suspense. The accumulated heat will combine with the temperature wall will cause the 7950X under heavy load to be unable to maintain 5 GHz, 230 watts at 95 degrees, and it will be ashes when it comes out, I'm assuming very hot. Even the Ryzen 5 is not much better, 120 watts at 90 degrees, which it compromised on cost. 230 watt 95 degree Zen 4 versus a 270 watt 82 degree Raptor Lake. So yeah, why is it that Raptor Lake is cooler? I say that in a relatively cooler. I mean, it's still, mid 80s, which is not exactly cool, and God knows what's going to happen if you're overclocking Raptor Lake as well. But of course, as most of you can probably guess, it's all to do with thermal density. Basically, when you have larger cores and you are, making them go brrr, well, heat can dissipate easier, but obviously when you have lots of cores and they're pretty damn titchy, it's much harder to dissipate that thermal mass. Now, again, I do want to stress that A, this is Ada 64, and B, these are not final production samples, and it's going to be very interesting when the community at large gets hold of these chips and starts doing all of the normal stuff, undervolting and selling their soul to try to improve thermals. But yeah, the fact that this is a 360 AIO, it's certainly not what you would call the best cooling solution possible. You could go with ultra high-end water cooling loops, you could, do whatever, but it's certainly not what I would consider a basic, standard stock cooler. And the question I've got is what's going to happen with small form factor systems. I'm going to be very interested to see how all of that plays out. So now let's move on to Ryzen V Cache. Now these processors are not going to be available at launch. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, according to Grayman, it looks like it's going to be CES that these processors launch. Another one of my sources told me that it's possibly just going to be an announcement at CES and they're going to launch a little bit later. But ultimately speaking, let's say Q1, early Q1 to mid Q1, we're going to have Ryzen V Cache available. And as you can probably imagine, there is a significant performance uptick. I have some early performance data. Now, this is according to a single source. I've run it by another person. They've told me it sounds about right, but they've not been able to personally verify it. So I just want to give you that caveat at the moment. I'm trying to find a little bit more information, and yeah, I'll be interested to see whether this is accurate, because a number of people have told me that the V Cache processors are significantly faster, but they didn't give me performance numbers, and this is average gaming performance that I'm about to share. So this is the only person that gave me the actual performance increase over the vanilla processors. However, a couple of others have told me that there's a significant increase in performance. Hopefully that was clear. Probably as clear as mud, but let's just get into this, shall we? So the 7800X 3D is 15% on average improvement in gaming performance. The 7900 is around 20% improvement in gaming performance, and the 7950X 3D is around 30%. There is a small regression in clocks, although at the moment it's not final. I've been told it's anything from 100 megahertz to maybe a little more, like 200 megahertz. And apparently the thermals are better on these processors, but that's relative, because obviously Zen 4 is already so bloody hot. So what I mean is that the technology for the V Cache is significantly better, like the way AMD are implementing it is much better. So the V Cache isn't so much responsible for the heat. However, Zen 4, as we just discussed a second ago, is already putting out a crap ton of heat. So it's kind of like me saying to you, well, the good news is I'm not going to kick you in the leg so hard. The bad news is I am going to, you know, kick you in the balls instead. So it's kind of like 50-50. Again, though, with all of this early performance data, it's very difficult to know just what's going to happen. For example, if we were to just pick on Nvidia for a second with all of the leaks of the RTX 40, do you remember how everyone was panicking at these mentions of like 800 watts power consumption and stuff? And of course, it's just test engineering board. We're not at that stage, though, for Zen 4. It is considerably, you know, closer to launch. But ultimately, I'm just saying that until something's final, until you see it on store shelves, or more accurately, until you actually plug it into your own PC and turning it on and seeing the thing go brrr, anything can change. Now we're going to move on to RDNA 3. Specifically, this is a couple of tweets from Grayman. We'll get into the specifics in just a moment, but I do find the wording of these tweets quite intriguing. So, as I'm sure most of you are aware at this point, Nave 31, according to all of the information that has been leaked from myself and several others, seems to be a single GCD with a number of MCDs, which are basically providing the infinity cache as well as acting as the memory controller. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got, you know, the GDDR6 memory and so on and so on. So basically speaking, it is chiplet based, and AMD themselves have officially confirmed that in their recent event. However, it's not chiplet based as in there are multiple GCDs. And for those who don't know, the GCD basically houses things like shaders, the ROPs, TMUs, yada yada yada. Now, intriguingly, I believe I was pretty much the first anyway to mention a Radeon Pro Duo card which may exist. Now, this is, as you can possibly guess, basically two chiplets together, but it seemed to be primarily designed around professional use, and it's basically to do with the interconnects. As far as I understand anyway, there was an issue, or whether it was intentional at the beginning or whether it was an issue that AMD couldn't resolve, I don't know. I've heard both explanations, but either way, the way that RDNA 3 is crafted anyway, there basically is no way that you can get two GCDs, about to say MCDs, two GCDs working harmoniously together in gaming. But what one of my sources did tell me, based on a couple of rumors from Grayman on Twitter, because they were stating that they'd been hearing of a dual variant which may actually be for gaming. And at first I was actually quite skeptical of this. I actually mentioned several times on Twitter that I don't think that's true. I definitely know that the Pro Duo cards may exist, and I don't know whether they're Nave 31 cut down SKUs or Nave 32. There's a debate, honestly, between my sources. Some are insisting it's cut down Nave 31 and others are stating no, it's N32, because it's not the full shader complement, basically. Long story short, however, Grayman was stating that no, there is a gaming variant incoming, and I basically reached out to more of my sources, and you know how it goes, you're kind of like digging and digging and digging, and I was told that yes, there may possibly be a gaming variant incoming for the dual GCDs, but if it does exist, and honestly I can't be certain it does, it basically would be a refresh. And so the reason it would be a refresh is that there would need to be quite a reworking, let's say, of the architecture of RDNA 3. Now, this is not confirmation it's happening. However, several people have told me that AMD are going to work on an RDNA 3 refresh, and I think also NVIDIA are going to do an RTX 40, but that's not too, surprising. Refreshes happen. I mean, even RDNA 2 got a refresh, kind of. I mean, it's not a refresh like, we've seen previously, like NVIDIA's, crap, I can't remember the architecture name, but, the 8000 series, back when it launched. Crap, what the hell was the architecture? It's going to really bug me, because I know it's really a bloody obvious architecture. Was it Tesla? I think it might have been Tesla. You know what? I'm going to look at that in a second. I'm pretty sure it's Tesla. Anyway, yeah, so the 8... Wow, I can't believe I couldn't remember that off the top of my head. Anyway, yeah, so the 8000 series essentially got a refresh with the 9000 series, of course, and NVIDIA did it with the, the 400 series with kind of a refresh for the 500 series, where they basically kind of fixed the power utilization issues, and yeah, basically more SMs were enabled at that point for the 580 versus like the 480. But some interesting information from Grayman. Now, what they've basically said is, initially they stated a 9-chiplet Navi 3 has started to be mass produced. So I was wondering why it was 7, but a 9. Navi, a chiplet with 13 chiplets has begun development. But he then stated, I misunderstood the meaning of the packaging factory. The current upper limit of the GPU's MCM package is 9. The next year product is 13, so it could actually be 13 or fewer. What does that mean? Well, basically, he's saying that the product next year theoretically could have more chiplets on it. Now, that doesn't mean much, because it could be anything. It could be more GCDs, it could be more MCDs, it could be AMD adding, ASICs to it, which could do things like AI and tensor cores. It could be AMD providing little additional circuitry which jumps out of your GPU, makes your pancakes in the morning. I'm just saying. However, I'm just mentioning it in this video because I do wonder whether the two are linked or not, given the fact that they are launched next year. So this is not a leak. I'm just simply giving kind of spitballing based on what Grayman's mentioned here. So I do want to report that, but also what I've mentioned previously and what he's mentioned previously. So I'm trying to marry the two up. I could be completely barking on the wrong tree on that one. So I'm not calling that a leak. I'm simply saying I find it intriguing. And I want to finish the video actually with something positive, and it's for Intel graphics. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Intel have actually entered the discrete GPU market, and they're doing so, of course, in a two-pronged strategy. The first is that they are entering the consumer space, so that would be, of course, mobile as well as desktop. And the second, of course, is that they're going into the server market. I'm not going to focus on the server stuff here because it's somewhat outside the remit of this video, and honestly, it would just add like another 10 minutes of complexity. But myself, a while ago, I leaked that I'd been hearing quite a lot of chatter, let's say, and the people who mentioned this were not just some random individuals. I don't want to even hint at how I heard this stuff, but I had it on some at least reasonable authority that there were some at least discussions within Intel that they were considering shuttering the discrete GPUs. So basically, they were still going to be producing the iGPUs for their Intel processors. So for example, the 14th, 15th, 16th generation still have iGPUs, and they would still be most likely working towards server stuff, so data center accelerators, because honestly, they kind of need that to compete against NVIDIA and, of course, AMD with their... Well, honestly, AMD stuff is also looking very impressive. But the gaming side of things, there were at least discussions that it could end up being shuttered. And the reason behind that is that it's going to take them a while to hit a significant amount of profitability. And we've all seen the delays of the first generation. But then Intel basically said that that's not the case. And honestly, at the end of the day, I'm going to take Intel's word over anything that I'm told, in back channels, because at the end of the day, Intel are the ones that kind of are, speaking publicly. But rather curiously, PC Gamer actually have an interview. I'm not going to discuss all of the stuff in this interview because, well, it's kind of lengthy, and I would encourage you guys to check it out yourself. I'll link it, of course, in the video description, but they said that they're not going anywhere in the discrete market. Our discrete business is basic technology development, and it goes both to data center and integrated GPUs. The thing I happen to believe, Pat and I, Roger, Lisa, Ryan, everybody is aligned with the idea that graphics is a critical technology to the client. It's critical technology to the data center. Most of our ASIC team is on Battle Mage. A small portion of it is on our future, which is Celestial. And there's also a very small portion on Alchemist, but they're kind of on a different function. Our plan is to start there. Now you can see their roadmap. So Battle Mage is basically Gen 2. And then of course you've got Celestial, which is Gen 3. And then you've got Druid, which is, well, after that. They're also calling it Gen A, Gen B, Gen C, Gen D. Obviously, Gen B, for example, is Battle Mage. And intriguingly as well, in the same interview, again, I'm going to leave a link to it in the video description, but they are actually being quite, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but quite confident in their wording in terms of the ray tracing performance of their products. Basically, they are stating that, a competitive Intel product against a competitive NVIDIA product, they use, for example, the RTX 3060, they think that they are as competitive, if not better. Now, at the end of the day, it's quite difficult to know. Because, I mean, what you could do, of course, is you could get the two graphics cards, put them together, and then, Bob's your uncle, right, and run benchmarks. But unfortunately, it's just a simple case that NVIDIA have done a lot more optimizations on most of their games. So it's going to be very interesting to see, to be honest, to see how Intel end up. I do believe Intel's hardware is going to be pretty capable. Just looking at the basics of the hardware, it should be pretty capable in ray tracing. I think, Gen 2, Gen 3 and so on, assuming that they do hit what was stated, they should be really impressive. And I've said this 100 times at this point, guys, but ultimately, well, let's just say, we can't predict what the 5090 or God knows what else is going to be in terms of performance, right? We can maybe say it's twice the performance of the 40, but we can't predict that. So let's just talk about the 40 series from NVIDIA. And let's just assume that Intel had their next generation cards available right on the same day that NVIDIA did. They're not going to be. They're going to be, quite a bit later. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that he did launch around the same time. I don't necessarily need Intel to offer another RTX 4090. Now, I'd like that. I would love Intel to offer a product which is up to that level of performance. However, honestly, I'm very happy for Intel to offer products which are, let's say, competitive with the 4060, the 4070, maybe the 4070 Ti, or possibly the 4080. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to say something really bloody obvious here, so, give me the award, but it's like, not everyone can afford to cough up like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 in a graphics card. And so if we can even see like the mid-range be brought down and be competitive in performance, I'd be more than good with that, honestly. It's going to be very interesting to see how the market actually responds at the end of the day. Intel haven't exactly hit volume with their cards, and that's putting it very kindly. Like you're kind of seeing reviews, because reviewers most of the time are going through hoops to get these things, to procure them. So yeah, I'm just hopeful that Intel do offer a great solution. I'm very hopeful for their processors. Like, I think that 13th and 14th generation, assuming there's not hideous delays in the 14th generation, and that just depends on who you ask, to be honest. But the 13th generation looks like it's going to compete quite well with Zen 4. I think Zen 4 V Cache is going to probably spank it. and tell it it's a bad boy, but you know what, that's probably not a big deal, because I think that V Cache is going to be significantly more expensive, and if you're, just for example, $200 more expensive than your competitor, then I think you'll find to be more, you know, faster. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Intel compete. At the end of the day, I kind of feel that Intel have been on a back foot. I think that they're slowly starting to, you know, fix all the messaging. I would have loved for them to have approached the 13th generation a little differently, and to have been more liberal in the way that you can overclock the processors, for example. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see how people choose to buy, especially in the mid-range. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions of like, do I go with the B series board and DDR4 memory and like a 13600 or whatever? Do I go with like a 7600 and, you know, blah 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 blah? There's going to be a lot of discussion, I think, on, and a lot of arguments of which one's best. Of course, at the end of the day, the BIOSes are not exactly going to be in optimum condition as well. So anyway, I am definitely rambling at this stage. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did, well, it's YouTube. You know what to do. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.